In this video, we are going to work on adding the actual quiz. We've talked about adding categories, adding questions to our categories. The next step is to add the actual quiz so that we can put our questions that we've typed in inside our quiz. So we're going to go in, and I've turned my editing on. We're going to go in and we're going to click on Add an Activity, and we want to add a quiz. Why we're going into this and why it's loading, I also need to remind you that the quiz module can be used for more than just giving tests or giving quizzes. You can create assignments inside your quiz so that your quiz is actually the assignment to where Moodle grades it for you so your student has immediate feedback. So there's a variety of things that you can use this for. So let's go in and we're going to name this, we'll just call it test. And we'll say that this is a test quiz. Just like everything else, you always have a description that you have to add. You can display this description on the course page if you would like, or you don't have to. Timing, if you are setting a specific time. So in other words, if you want this quiz to open at a specific time and close at a specific time so that your students have a certain amount of time to take the quiz, you may do that. So in other words, between this time and that time you can go in and take the quiz. The other item that you can do to set as far as your quiz is time limit. So in other words, you can give them 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, whatever it is, to take the test. One thing to keep in mind, if you use these types of limitations, you also have to take into account if a student has technical difficulties and those kind of things. I always like to give the example, when I was taking one of my online classes, the instructor would set a specific time, and if you had technical difficulty, that was just tough. You still weren't able to take your quiz. So you need to make sure that when you're teaching an actual online class that you take that into consideration as far as making those types of stipulations on students. Remember that your students are not all in a big city where internet is easily accessible and those kind of things. Time limit works good if you are trying to eliminate the possibility of students looking up every answer. But again, you need to take into account if you have students who are in rural areas, they may not have the amount of time they need to be able to take those tests. So keep those things in mind when you are setting these types of deadlines. One thing to also to look at when time expires, there's a variety of choices. They can go ahead and it can automatically end at that point in time. They can go ahead and finish their attempt, and then you can decide whether those questions will be accepted and those kind of things. Okay, so the next item we're going to look at is grade, and this is in Module 5, so I'm going to go ahead and click this as Module 5. You can give your students unlimited tries at a test. You can give them one try depending on what it is. If it is for information purposes, in other words, you're letting your students know what they need to know, you may want to give them more opportunities to take the test. If it's a regular test, you probably want to give them one attempt to take the test. Layout dictates whether how your questions are going to show up. Do you want them random? Do you want them shuffled randomly? In other words, so that the test doesn't appear in the same order for any certain student. And so I usually shuffle my questions randomly. You also need to pick how do you want them to show. Do you want all your questions to show on one page? Do you want a new page for every question? And again, this is just a matter of preference. There's really no right or wrong answer. Studies show that students do better sometimes if they don't have to look at the whole test all at one time. However, there's some students that get real edgy if they have to change every page. So it's just a matter of preference. I usually leave mine on new page for every question. Question behavior, do you want to shuffle within the question? In other words, if you have multiple choice questions, A, B, C, D will not be the same on everyone's test. What you have to remember on this is if you have all of the above are correct or none of the above are correct, you probably don't want to shuffle within your question, because that's going to, if A is none of the above, that's not going to make a lot of sense. And so I usually say no to shuffle within the question. So I shuffle my questions. In other words, question number 1 will be different for every student. I usually don't shuffle within my questions just to prevent that from happening. Review options. This dictates when the student is going to be able to see the right answer. And a lot of this depends on if you're going to have students retake a test, then obviously you don't want them to be able to see their results immediately after the test, because they're going to know which ones they got right, which ones they got wrong. And so then it's going to end up being a guessing game. So a lot of this depends on how you're going to score the test and what you're going to expect them to do. If you uncheck them, that means that they're not going to be able to see their marks. In other words, they're not going to be able to see which ones are wrong. They're not going to be able to see overall feedback. By checking the top, that takes the rest of the check marks out. So on this, whether it's correct or not, what the marks are, in other words, whether they're right or wrong, any specific feedback that you've given them, and then this is whether they can see the right answer or not. As we go on down the line, the display is, do you want them to have to show their picture? You know, there's a lot of different stipulations you can put as far as how the student can enter the quiz. Are you going to require a password? Are you going to require that they give their network address? Those kind of things. And again, this is a means of preventing students from cheating on a test. Overall feedback. Again, this just gives you an opportunity to say, if they get 100%, you can say, you know, woohoo, good job, or whatever it happens to be. Common module settings is whether they show or whether it's hidden. Restrict access, again, is back to the making students requiring students to do one thing before they can open the quiz, and so it gives them that possibility. And then there's the activity completion, and again, I usually always do complete when conditions are met, and on this it's when students receive a grade is what I choose, because just viewing it doesn't mean that they've completed the quiz. Then we save and return to the course. And once you've returned to the course, we go back down, and now our quiz that we just created is here. So now I'm going to go into my quiz and I'm going to add my questions, which is what the next video is going to explain to you.